really work like that. And so what we really need to do is divide the project into psychologically, how do religious experiences work in producing these beliefs? And then epistemologically, on various ways they may work, would they be rational? And it seems quite rash, it seems to me actually irrational to think, I don't care how they work, no matter how they work, no matter if it's exactly like sense experience, they've got to be irrational because they're religious beliefs. Right? Of course, if they work exactly like sense perception in all the relevant ways, we have to say they're rational.
I believe that if somebody says he sees a pink elephant by his bed, that he does see a pink elephant by his bed, but I don't believe there is a pink elephant. And why should I take the private, internal, revealed beliefs of a religious person any more seriously?
Well, there are various ways people can come to believe there's a pink elephant by their bed. In most of the cases, I would imagine, they have good reason for disbelieving it. We could cook up a scenario in which they rationally believe it.
Well, they see it with their own eyes. They say, I see a pink elephant.
Yes. Well, I actually think it's false that they see a pink elephant. But
well,
that's
so do I, but
right.
That's my point.
Right.
This is reassuring.
Well, I thought he said, before he had said, they do see a pink elephant.
They report that they see a pink elephant, and they honestly, sincerely believe they see a pink elephant.
That's right. For you, all you have is their report, and that works as evidence. Right? It may be quite different for the person themselves.
Yeah.
Right. For them, this may be, in the many senses in which this could be used, a basic belief.
Yeah.
Right. And this whole line of defense is a defense of the rationality of theistic beliefs. Given certain ways, religious experience might work.
So you mean it could be rational to believe there's a pink elephant, but still false to believe there's a pink elephant?
That certainly could happen.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
It could happen in the religious case as well.
Exactly.
But that it does happen.
So then
it hasn't been shown that is what does happen in the religious case. But of course it could.
We've never been shown any reason to think it's otherwise, and I would have thought that there is no reason to elevate religious belief in any way over private, sincerely held belief in pink elephants.
Well, if we demand evidence for it, I think it is the lesson of the last few centuries of epistemology that we have no good evidence for our simple perceptual beliefs either.
No, but suppose we take something like a scientific belief in plate tectonics or in evolution or in something that all scientists accept is true, and you do too. What then are we going to say about that? If we mistrust our perception, do we mistrust the measurements that are made by the scientific community?
That's right. What I would say is it is ultimately based on some measure of faith we have in our simple perceptual judgments. Okay? In the case of our perceptual judgments, right, they cohere so much strongly with one another, with each other, that we're able to develop a science. And I certainly want to admit, right, we've made so much more progress in ferreting out the bad apples in this realm. I want to admit the epistemological consequences of that. That's why, as far as I can tell, no body of theistic beliefs is as rationally held as current science. Right? I want to admit that comparison. But still, falling short of that very high ideal is compatible with their being quite rational nonetheless.
But it sounds like the version of religious belief that you're proposing is kind of it's as if it's a hypothesis which has some warrant, but now does not have nearly as much warrant as scientifically validated beliefs. And in a way, it's might be a characterization of the so-called, at least the pretensions of so-called scientific creationism, namely the claim of some creationists that, well, I've just looked at the data, and it just so happens that the best explanation for the hypothesis is that the world was created 5,730 years ago, and that there was a flood, and all the fossils, the geology proves that there was a flood, and two of each animal, and so on. But it seems to me that although that might characterize a certain rearguard strategy by certain religious groups in the United States quite recently, it doesn't seem to characterize the vast majority of religious belief worldwide, which, as people like Atran and Boyer point out, these beliefs really are set aside and treated as different from everyday experience, and they're surrounded by rituals, by bowing in unison, by public avowals of faith, where the more preposterous the belief, the more virtue inheres in the avower, in blood rituals and communal meals. And that when philosophers in modern philosophy debate epistemology, or when scientists debate the alternative hypotheses, such as for the demise of the dinosaurs, after proposing a hypothesis, they don't then whip themselves into a bloody pulp, or fast for 3 days, or bow in unison. So they don't need all of these auxiliary measures to prop up the shared belief. The interesting empirical phenomenon of religious belief is that people seem not to just trust ordinary rationality and feel the need to prop it up with all of these extra logical techniques of manipulation. And so I'm wondering if your characterization of religion really applies only to kind of a late appearing strategy in industrial countries of how we can preserve religion in the face of the juggernaut of science, and maybe we'll try to beat them at their own game or play their own game, but this is actually not typical of religious belief.
Yeah, certainly. If, and there's no doubt this is done to varying extents in varying religious traditions, if these religious beliefs are set aside and treated as sacrosanct, and there's strong evidence against them, which is ignored, then very likely those religious beliefs are held irrationally.
I'll give you an example of this from my own religious upbringing. But I remember hearing a rabbi who was trying to reconcile the fact that the scientists say that the world is 4 billion years old with the doctrine that it's 5,730 years old or whatever. And he said his argument was, well, the scientists used to believe that the world was 8 billion years old, and if they can be off by 4 billion years once, they can be off by 4 billion years again. Which he said, by the way, in all sincerity.
Yes, I don't want to be endorsing any such reasoning. The creationists, if we have the same people in mind, and I suspect we have roughly the same people in mind, their beliefs are irrational because they misprocess the evidence. And I suspect we'd have the same diagnosis of that. People in various religious traditions who believe lots of things for which they have strong evidence against, yet they ignore that evidence due to maybe some of the mechanisms you've told us about. Their beliefs would also be irrational. Okay, so I'm not saying everyone's theistic belief is rational, no matter how it's held. And maybe even most of them are irrational. I'm just trying to say how it might be that it could be rational in some situations.
I think we'd like to have some discussion with you. I would sort of note a couple things. One, there are two strategies, really, of trying to rehabilitate the credibility of religious belief. One is to try to show parity, that it's actually similar to or on all fours with scientific belief. The other, which we've also picked up hints of here, is to undermine the credibility of scientific beliefs. You can equalize credibility by making everything incredible. And so those sometimes work together at the same time, even though they're working in opposite directions. So that's an observation.